Hello, everyone. My name is Jeff Springborn, and welcome to today's webinar, Building Your Through-Channel Marketing Strategy with Peter O'Neill, VP and Research Director at Forrester. My name is Jeff Springborn. I'm the Director of Sales at MarcomCentral. And before I hand it over to Peter, I'd like to give a brief overview on MarcomCentral, who we are. I wanted to let everybody on the line know the intent of today's webinar is really for educational purposes and knowledge share to our marketing peers within enterprise marketing departments. A little bit on MarcomCentral before I hand it over to Peter. MarcomCentral, we are a software as a service platform. We've been around for a while, established in 1999. We support 414 enterprise brands. Their end users can be their sales channels, local stores. Some of the channels that we'll be talking about today in the Forrester webinar can access our portal to find marketing content. And some of the problems we help solve within enterprise companies include managing brand and regulatory compliance, making sure that your latest and greatest content is available across multiple channels to all the sales channels, local stores, employees that would need that content. And some of what will be talked about today is the need to allow customization to a local market of that content, but within certain limits. So through templating tools, our platform allows the access of content including print marketing, email marketing, social media content, and allowing local channels, whatever they may be, to customize within certain limits. MarcomCentral also integrates through our APIs with best-in-breed software technology to allow enterprise companies to take advantage of CRM data like that would be within Salesforce.com, for example. We also integrate with marketing automation tools like Marketo and Eloqua to automate personalized messaging, like the example you see here, personalized proposals direct to a prospect. So we tie in to what Peter will be talking about today in the ability to allow users to access content, different marketing channels, and then also customize and allow the different users that need that, being your different sales channels, to get that content. So with that, I'd like to hand it over to Peter O'Neill, the VP and Research Director at Forrester. Peter, I'm going to hand control over to you and go ahead and take it away.
Hey Jeff, thank you very much for that introduction, and hello everybody who's on this webinar or even maybe listening to the webinar at a later date. Welcome to this, and I hope you'll enjoy the information that I'm going to share with you. Some of you may have been expecting my colleague Tim Harmon to be speaking. That's who we had planned till about 10 days ago, but he's indisposed, and I hope that I will be a very sufficient replacement for him. And actually, I've been looking forward to this webinar now for those 10 days because I clearly remember it's about 2.5 years ago now that Tim Harmon, a colleague Laurie Wisdow, and myself started to create a series of reports where we, in the name of Forrester, started to discuss a new category of marketing automation, a new and emerging category of marketing automation that we labeled and entitled Through-Channel Marketing Automation. And the reason for that work was that we see our job here at Forrester. We're helping and providing research and also advice to B2B marketing professionals. And as you can see on the logo or the tagline for Forrester, we try to challenge thinking. And then when we challenge the thinking, we also try to help our clients to lead change and transform their processes and their automation projects. But this was definitely an element of challenge thinking, because at that time, most of the early adopters of the most standard or famous marketing automation systems like the Marketo you just heard about or Eloqua were basically just adopting some sort of resource management system, marketing resource management, or even digital asset management systems, adding on their marketing automation, or as Forrester actually called it, lead to revenue management automation. And it basically served the purpose of digital marketing, inbound marketing, lead nurturing through the marketing system, and then of course at some point passing those leads across to the sales organization as opportunities, where usually there was a media break, because then the sales organization would manage those leads or opportunities in their CRM system. And it all sounded quite easy, and the company started off doing these automation projects. But Laurie and Tim and I were talking to clients and finding clients who had very much more complex marketing challenges and marketing scenarios, actually especially over here in Europe where I'm based. I live in Germany, because they were needing to deal with much more complexity. They were doing marketing through different countries, using different languages, through different subsidiaries, through partners and dealers and so on. So it wasn't just a sales force they dealt with, it was the added complexity of all those different partners. And their needs, those companies' needs, was being serviced by a small group of usually smaller vendors, or even sometimes by project companies that put together a particular marketing automation solution specific to the needs of that company. And so what we thought, Tim, Laurie and I at the time, was this is an emerging technology category, and actually some of this complexity is going to start to appear in most other companies as well, because of digital automation, because of the age of the customer and so on, as I'll come into in a few more minutes. And so that's why we started the story. And Jeff, if you could move on to the title slide and then move straight away into the next slide, please. Thank you. One more. So if we fast forward to now, 2.5 years later, no, go back please, 2.5 years later, we've got the advent of digital marketing. We've got definitely the state that many companies now are automating in their marketing organization at a very fast pace. But let's not forget also that many channel partners that have built up their businesses in various industries are now actually quite mature companies and have a lot of maturity in their business processes, including marketing. And some of them actually think that their brand as a channel partner is more important than the brand of some of the manufacturers that they represent and go to market with. So in a way, we have a sort of cacophony of different marketing messages getting to customers, and we have that complexity that I mentioned a few moments ago now actually growing across lots of different industries and affecting most every business-to-business organization because of digital, because of customer needs changing, and so on. So there's the sort of scenario written or described as an anecdote. Let's go into it in a little bit more detail, please. So Jeff, the story so far. So once upon a time, as I've hoped to describe now, things were a little bit easier. You had a brand, a large company, or a manufacturer, or a vendor. We're not too sure what term to use there, so we've put all three into that blue bubble at the top. And they were communicating through various marketing means with end customers. And in the old days, before digital, there would be brochures that you print out, you would distribute mailing programs and so on. And those companies that had business partners or channel partners, and I used to be a channel manager myself at HP, 25 years ago, we'd help our channel partners with a nice big binder of corporate identity and logos and so on. And I remember telling people off for not using the Pantone 343, whichever the number was, for HP Blue at the time. And it was all very analog, paper-based type of marketing. The brand manufacturer vendor was very much in control because they distributed the marketing materials physically to and through their partners. But things started to get quite complicated. As you can see on the next slide, there's a whole advent of different communication channels that are now being used, primarily digital, of course, and digital marketing now has raised a whole area of problems because there are now so many different ways to communicate with buyers and with customers. Some of the companies have been able to share their digital marketing assets through solutions like MarcomCentral with their channel partners as well. And so the channel partners are able to take advantage of all these possibilities as well, as you can see on the next slide. So we came out with our first report. It was June of 2015. That's how far back we're looking now. And the report was entitled, "Turn Your Channel into a Marketing Machine." Because another change going on at this time was that a lot of companies were starting to realize that they could do more with their channel than just equipping them to sell. They could work with their channel partners to do marketing together, and you started to see programs like MDF funds, programs starting to be used for marketing programs and marketing campaigns, and not just for incenting salespeople. So these changes were starting to happen. But I also remember an interesting meeting around that time, the mid 2015. I was sitting in a partner advisory council. It was in the south of France, and it was run by a very large IT equipment vendor, and they were meeting their most important partners. The discussion was very much around marketing automation, and this large IT equipment vendor told their partners, or requested of their partners, we are using Marketo to distribute content, to manage our leads, and so on. We recommend that you all also buy a Marketo system for yourselves, and then we can communicate and work with each other much more easily. They just assumed that would be no problem at all, and they made that proposal. To be honest, the partners were not happy with that idea at all. Marketo, if you know the system, is an expensive investment, and many of these partners were not prepared to do that just to satisfy the needs of the large IT equipment vendor, and so I was able to sit in and observe, and my job there was actually to moderate that discussion. So it became a little bit of a conflict, and quite a few channel firms, to be honest, are now actually quite mature themselves, and think that they're able to promote their own brand and not necessarily the manufacturer's brand. On the next slide, you can start to see that this is probably starting to confuse the end users as well. If you can move on one more, please. So at this point, if the channel is doing marketing themselves and controlling their story, and the manufacturers continue to go to the customers as well and communicate, you start to see some very confused customers. And of course, the challenges across this whole industry or ecosystem that we're representing on this slide is consistency. The vendors, of course, are worried about brand integrity, but actually some of the distributors and resellers are as well. And very often the end consumer or the end buyer at the bottom of this picture here is getting conflicting messages and conflicting promises from all the different players in this ecosystem. The buyer is confused, as we'll describe now on the next slide. Confusion for the buyer often results in it taking much longer for them to make a decision to buy something. So the whole deal, the whole transaction, the whole buying process is slowed down. And very often we would hear from buyers that they're not too impressed with the brand or the manufacturer that they're working with now, because they don't feel that they're being serviced properly, neither from the marketing department of the manufacturer, nor from maybe from the local partner who is doing business with them and then helping them to be successful using a technology or using a product. So that's the preamble. So let's look at this story in a little bit more detail on the next slide, and talk about some of the challenges that we've been hearing from many of the channel executives that we talk to that are clients of ours. So I'll take you through them one by one. So the channel itself as part of the business is really under more and more pressure now to provide some financials about the return on investment into channel itself, but into channel marketing specifically. This is something that's sort of come up over the last 18 months or so. The effectiveness of Salesforce and so on, and productivity of sales forces, it's become quite a science in many companies, but at the same time, financial people in the larger enterprises are now turning their attention as well to how is the money being spent in channel marketing, and now how effective are these different elements of the channel marketing programs. And these are questions now that channel execs are starting to need to provide and answer and get information about. And as I said, many of the channel partners themselves are also now mature companies with similar financial business pressures. So keep clicking, please, Jeff. Thank you. because of in some industries we're still seeing a very high-touch model, i.e. things are not moving completely to an e-business, e-commerce model, but you need feet on the street, person-to-person meetings, and that is also being a large element of the channel management and what issue that channel executives are having to deal with. Next, please. We've heard this phrase used a few times now, especially from the manufacturers, that they put together quite effective processes and systems of gathering leads and passing leads through to channel partners, but it's very often the case there is no feedback to the manufacturers and the vendors about the status and about the success of those leads. It's been often termed as the channel lead black hole. Some vendors put together deal registration systems to try and incent the process and drive the process. To be honest, many channel partners are quite suspicious of such systems and don't necessarily want to be part of that system. And so there's always a give and take from both sides in this direction. Another business challenge is, let's see what comes next, just the whole relationship across the channel. We've done a lot of work also in terms of channel partner loyalty in quite a few different industries. It used to be the case in most industries that there was some element of lock-in between a manufacturer, a brand, and their channel, and it was very often a one-to-one relationship. But nowadays, typically, a channel partner in technology or in healthcare or in insurance is actually representing 5, 6, maybe up to 10 different vendors in their industry to their own market. And so it's easy for the channel partner to switch their allegiance and to promote and recommend something else. And it's difficult for the OEMs or vendors or brands or manufacturers to instill loyalty in their partners and to receive loyalty from their partners. And of course, the events from the partner, from the manufacturer point of view, such as new product introductions and awareness programs, may be important from their point of view, but often are not considered in the same importance by the partners. So partners also tell us and tell their vendors that the experience itself is now quite disjointed. Partner portals are very often, there are several different portals that manufacturers offer. The very large manufacturers often have a series of portals, one for different business units, and that confuses the partner. And of course, the partner having 6 to 10 manufacturers to deal with, you can just imagine the math there of, you know, each manufacturer with 3 portals and then times 6 or times 10. That makes a very, very complicated world that the partner itself has to deal with. And we've got one more topic to talk about in this context, and that is measuring success of partner programs, measuring success of partners and measuring success of investments into channel programs. Is it around the revenue per partner? Is it around the growth of certain partners? Is it around the intentions that the manufacturer has to penetrate new territories, geographic or business territories, or even to have success with new products through the channel? And so very much the business objectives that the manufacturers are setting themselves, they're having difficulty trying to set them same objectives through their partners, and more importantly, how to measure that success and incent in that direction so that their business success is appropriate. Now, there are some other things going on around the world as well that are making this even more difficult. Forrester decided and declared about 4 years ago that we have entered the age of the customer. That is the term that we're using. Now, we're very serious about when we talk about age of the customer, and you'll find a multitude of different reports that are analyzing this now in much more detail. I hope the graphic itself is actually quite self-explanatory, but it really has a massive effect on the way that businesses are working. The age of the customer basically means that the controllers move to the customer. But we think this is actually not something that is just this year's trend or last year's trend. We think this is a 20-year business cycle that kicks off around 2010 and is going to continue through to 2030. And so if you are seeing changes and appreciating changes already about your customers being more empowered, having more information, being prepared to spend their own time on researching products and services before wanting to talk to a company or a salesperson, to be honest, you ain't seen nothing yet. That will continue to continue. And all the changes that we observe in the consumer world, and each of us, of course, are consumers as well, and just sit back and think about how you behave when you're buying something as a consumer. All of those trends are coming through in B2B in the same way. The advent of social media, the way that buyers now collect information from each other and go into details and find information about price even before they even talk to a manufacturer or a vendor or the partner of the manufacturer or the vendor. So the role of sales and selling has changed quite dramatically. We actually had a report about 2 years ago that we entitled Death of the B2B Salesman, where we predicted that a certain type of salesperson would no longer be required, and the same applies in the channel. So the role of salespeople has changed a lot. I like the phrase that one of sales executive gave to me a few months ago, that the role of sales has moved from selling to advising and helping the buyer to decide and buy. And actually they were seriously thinking about changing the name and the job title for their account managers and their sales managers. So the role of sales is changing, but also the role of marketing is changing. The role of marketing is now to provide more information digitally, more content marketing, of course, being a very strong topic. That content should be more business orientated. Not only about the product and offering, it should be actually speaking to the needs of customers and buyers and discussing the business problems that those customers and buyers are solving or wanting to solve with the solutions they're looking for. And it should be engaging with the buyers. And so very often now we see, and this is why people are starting to work with things like Marketo and Eloqua, that marketing are engaging with buyers during the sales cycle, and sales comes in much later to provide a different type of information. But of course, channels, as I've shown before, channel partners are involved in that process as well. So this whole challenge of the age of the customer is also very important for channel partners as well. Next slide, please. So what do we do about it? We as manufacturers, we as marketers who have to think about not only our direct sales force, but an ecosystem and community of channel partners. How do we enable, equip, and collaborate with our channel to ensure that we all have a concerted, consistent value proposition? We have a consistent brand promise. We're communicating with the same materials. And that's just the marketing statements I'm making there, but maybe we should think about it one step higher. Are we all working together to provide the same or a seamless customer experience? And ideally, I heard one business executive describe it this way: they would like a customer to feel they're dealing with the same company regardless of whether they talk to an employee of the manufacturer or an employee of the channel partner. They should be provided with the same experience during that process. So we think there's the need for a system of processes and automation to address this, to make the engagement between the manufacturer, the channel, and the end customer as smooth and as beneficial to all players in this ecosystem, and of course more productive. And that's what we've defined now as through channel marketing automation, which we put together as a formal definition as per the Forrester manner on the next slide. And so we defined through channel marketing automation as a distributed or federated marketing system which is being used by enterprise marketers to enable and scale local marketing program execution. I'm using the word channel very often, but actually when I say channel, I can mean resellers, I can mean stores, I can mean agents, franchisees, and so on, maybe even country organization subsidiaries. We see all those different scenarios and those use cases being serviced through this type of solution. And we declared in 2015 that this was an emerging market. We found some vendors of TCMA solutions and were able to put together what's called a Forrester wave in the third quarter of 2015. In the meantime, we've met quite a few new vendors who are entering this market. We also are being briefed by other established software vendors who are adding these types of functionalities to their existing marketing automation or asset management systems to make their solution more appealing to companies who have this type of complexity in front of them. And as I said before, right at the start, that used to be a small niche of companies, but in the meantime, because of digital, because of the age of the customer, because of the way the industries themselves are breaking out into different channels, this complexity is now becoming apparent in most every business-to-business organization. So what TCMA does, on the next slide, this is the graphic that we use to describe how this works, is basically enable the brand manufacturer vendor to provide content, to do search engine optimization, to do listening, so a lot of digital marketing as well, to manage the lead process in addition, through the various channels that they have when they go to market. And we put down some of those players listed out here in this graph. So the capabilities that we think of necessary and coming through for TCMA solutions are listed on the left side of this slide. If Jeff, if you can click, very much around the content side, being able to syndicate content, to share content, to manage content, and paper hasn't gone away, so that also includes paper content. Syndicating is much more than content. It could be also social media, and information in that direction, and of course campaigns. Putting together campaign in a box would be the nice phrase that very often channel managers like to use, and helping channel partners to be part of a campaign or to run their own campaigns, or even helping manufacturers to be part of a channel partners campaign. You add up in different ways. And of course, TCMA systems will also enable data to be shared, data about customers, data about solutions, and so on, as some of the examples we saw right at the start. So this is helping companies really to drive efficiency, to basically drive out cost as they help channel partners with their marketing, because there are central repositories of information and systems. Now, one of the main issues I described before was governance of the brand, consistency of messaging, and so on. Clearly, with a TCMA system that manages the content assets across an ecosystem of manufacturer and channel partners, you can ensure this consistency, and you can ensure the availability of the right content for the right channel partner at the right time. A system that is able to be used, an agile system where channel partners can basically switch on their campaigns and adapt information about the new products and new campaigns that the manufacturer are offering very quickly. And last but not least, the data that's provided around these systems, and this is something that marketers are now getting more and more interested in, not just analyzing the customer data, but more and more interested in analyzing the success and the optimization of their own campaigns and their own investments. And we're starting to see quite a lot of interest in marketing performance management, where CMOs and marketing managers and executives really now want to take advantage of digital and information they get about their digital programs and be able to report to their executives how successful the marketing programs are. And of course, we have here the added complexity of reporting the success of marketing programs that include third parties. So we have this whole list of benefits coming out of using a TCMA system, and there are a couple of Forrester reports that go into that in more detail. Now, when companies start to consider their TCMA projects, and well, I always think about the project being as designing processes and also investing in automation in the TCMA solutions that are around now, they first of all need to do a little bit of homework, because to be honest, not all partners are equal. They come in all marketing ages and stripes, and so we have this concept at Forrester when we advise our clients of what's called the partner spectrum. And before you start working with a TCMA on a TCMA process and thinking about purchasing automation, you really need to understand and review your partner landscape so that what you plan and buy is a realistic solution and a realistic project in terms of the needs and the capabilities of your partners. So a few of your partners are like this. You know, they're really mature corporate marketers. They have their own marketing strategy. They have their own, probably, marketing technology stack as well. They're more likely, actually, to see their brand as most important and will want to sort of pick and choose from the marketing programs and assets that you offer to them. They will want to feel in control. So you'll have some partners like this. At the other end of that spectrum, you'll have many partners that look like the next slide. They're partners with, to be honest, little interest in or little capacity for doing any marketing at all. They'll have no idea about how to leverage your marketing assets, your marketing campaigns. It's not their world. They're good at selling, they're good at looking after customers, and they expect the vendors behind them supplying them to be doing the sort of marketing. So more like the old-fashioned partners that maybe 10 years ago, and some of them are still like that. We call these Luddites, by the way. Now there's the spectrum, and actually those were the two extremes of the spectrum. Next slide. And there are actually many partners in between those extremes. We see actually two classes of partners that we can put in between those extremes. Next slide. So some of them are not sort of totally devoid of marketing competence, but they need some help, especially in terms of resources and guidance about what to do. And the other class, now the fourth class, are basically quite good at marketing. They're ready to take off and take advantage of basically anything that you can provide. So you can see the full spectrum now I've described on the next slide. And we think there are these four classes of partners that you probably have within your ecosystem. And you need to discern exactly what is the mix of partners that you're dealing with. And that will help to inform your decision process and decision making about what type of TCMA processes you want to establish and what type of TCMA automation products you need to provide. So Jeff, if you click out the four words on this slide, then you'll find that we've just developed some labels for these classes of partners. The far right are those very capable corporate marketers that are so capable that they actually will be demanding in terms of how you deal with them. And then right through to the other end, those people who are basically innocent of any marketing knowledge themselves, not motivated to do marketing, they are the Luddites, as I've described. And so we've done a bit of research across various industries, and we came up with the table here on the next slide that shows an analysis of these four classes of partners. So on the left side, you can see once again some of the descriptions. On the right side, what to do and what they're looking for. In the middle, that graph, the percentage distribution, is our estimate across various industries. So let's call it B2B wide. We think around 5% of the partner organizations that manufacturers deal with are corporate marketers. We think that 20% are what we call power marketers who want to do it themselves, take your content, take your campaigns, and then run with them. 35% are the sort of in-between and neophytes that are about to acquire marketing competency, but they need resources from yourself. Do it for me. The Luddites, we put at a very large 40%. Now, of course, this mix will be different, and this is the challenge that you will have to put together an understanding. We've helped some clients just to put together the analysis of their partner ecosystem. Usually it's enough just to interview some of the channel managers. They would be able to give you this type of feedback, and then maybe validate the information with a survey across a part of your channel population, just to get yourself an idea of the spread of the type of corporate, how many corporate marketers you're dealing with, how many power marketers, how many neophytes, and how many Luddites are you working with. Our advice, once you then introduce a TCMA system, is that you probably introduce it first in a pilot system, usually around to the power marketers. Because that's where you get some early success. As, by description, these are people who are prepared to take advantage of the resources that you're making available. They're capable of doing that, and therefore if you can empower these power marketers using a TCMA system, you are testing the processes, you are getting success stories that you can then share with other partners, and you have a great kickoff to your TCMA implementation project. The next stage then is to maybe look at the neophytes and pick the more promising neophytes and do the same with them. If you could come back, please. I'm not finished on that slide. And then go for the corporate marketers and the Luddites once you have your TCMA systems established. Other best practices that we've noted when companies implement their TCMA projects is that in addition to setting processes and automating with maybe some of the solutions available now, we also highly recommend that you provide agency support services, so marketing agencies. You provide a menu of marketing agencies to your partners to basically help them take advantage of your content and your campaigns and your marketing programs. This is a very important sort of assistance that needs to be made, especially around some of the neophyte organizations that probably haven't worked with marketing agencies to date. Okay, so there's a lot more I could say about TCMA in terms of how you select your products and how you select your projects and put them together. We have a report that Tim and I did a few months ago. It's entitled 4 Best Practices for Applying Through Channel Marketing Automation. And what I'd like to offer you when you see my email address later on is make a note of that email address. And if you would like to see that report and give me feedback as well, feel free to drop me an email. And let me know, and by return I will send you a copy of that 4 Best Practices report. 4 Best Practices for Applying Through Channel Marketing Automation. Okay, Jeff, next slide please. The last section of this presentation is about how to define success of your Through Channel Marketing Automation project. So we've observed quite a few projects, and we've thought about how do you measure the success of the project, and we have some advice here about what to do, about what's important. Well, one metric of success, for example, would be how many partners are taking advantage of the services that you're providing through the TCMA system. Logging into the portal to get content, taking part in the campaigns, leveraging the information that you might be providing of search engine optimization and social media content and things like that. So there's definitely one important metric that you could set yourself a target and evaluate your success. If we click on, we'll find some others. One company decided that the success of their TCMA system will depend on how many leads are being generated through that system. A little bit myopic maybe, it may not be the only thing that guarantees success or shows success, but it was a very sales-orientated company, and that was their measure of success basically across the whole company. Another example of metrics that we're hearing is the engagement type metrics, and we'll probably start to see this more and more because the number of touches, the number of touch points between customers or prospects and the manufacturer or the partner is becoming an important measure of marketing engagement and buyer engagement. And with many digital systems now being used, this can be measured and recorded, and it shows how deep the relationship is developing. When we say marketing touches, by the way, at Forrester, we like to talk about marketing being involved through the whole customer life cycle. We don't just think marketing is now just a lead generation machine. We think marketing is involved from the initial phase that a customer goes through, which is what we call the discover phase, when they just start to think about having to solve some sort of business issue but have no idea what to do about it and what they need to buy, right through to the 6th phase that we define in our customer life cycle, which we call engage, which is when the user or customer is so happy with what they've invested in and what they're using that they start to advocate the same thing to their peers, to other companies, and marketers are now learning to do advocate marketing in that final phase as well. So we see customer engagement now being and marketing being involved around the whole customer life cycle, especially, of course, as almost every business or industry has moved its business model towards as a service, being provided as a service. Everything from software and hardware to multi-million-dollar aircraft engines are now being provided as a service, which means you have renewals, which means you have relationships, and so on and so on. You can also measure in terms of how much of the content that you provide is being used and leveraged by your partners. And we use the word content to be a very broad category now, not just not brochures or blogs, but right through to things like tweets or even SMSs. And how well, if you have this type of TCMA solution, or if your partners are that mature, how well do your partners personalize, customize your content to their brand promise, to their offerings? A couple more still left here on the slide in terms of success metrics. Let's click on, Jeff, thank you. So the velocity of your lead process, how quickly, how productive is your lead management system in terms of from lead to close. And so often we talk about volume of leads and value of leads, but the velocity of leads for the very mature marketing companies is becoming an important criteria and a metric. How quickly, how productive are you in marketing? So I think there's one more to go, and that's another lead velocity as well, but in dollars as opposed to in time. So actually, if you think about these metrics and think about the types of partners that you're dealing with, we were able here at Forrester to put together what we call a TCMA maturity model. So a through channel marketing automation maturity model on the next slide, which actually helps our clients to understand where they are. And so we found clients who have set up a TCMA system and processes, and they're at stage 1. They're really much around email campaigning, and maybe they're using the web to share content with their partners. But that's basically the first step of this maturity model. As you go further up this ladder, you can see more sophistication being added, and that sophistication, of course, has to be in parallel. It's sophistication that the vendor or manufacturer is adding to the TCMA system in terms of populating it with content and processes and programs, but also the sophistication has to be reflected in the way that your partners work as well, using it and taking advantage of the digital information, of how you target together, you do profiling together, and you distribute leads in a much more considered manner, a more strategic manner. How at stage 4 we see some companies now actually finally successfully able to spend their MDF funds, and it's amazing, almost half of the companies we talk to never seem to spend or only spend about 60% of their MDF budgets each year, because they just don't have processes in place and metrics in place to ensure that their partners are using the money all the way. And right at the top, we found just a couple, maybe 2 or 3% so far, of companies who have implemented TCMA systems in their partner ecosystem who are now able to attribute all the different marketing processes and their marketing programs and attribute success They're able to understand the journeys that their customers are making. That involves discussing and meeting with partners as well. So the complexity of the customer journey within a partner ecosystem is a much more complex problem to document and to map than it would be if you were selling through a direct sales force or selling direct on the web only. And of course, the beauty of having all this information available and knowledge available means that you can really improve and plan for the next year in a much more considered and strategic manner. So here's the maturity model, and behind this graph we have questionnaires and a methodology that we can use to help our clients understand where they are. So let me close with just some ideas that I hope I brought across in the last 40 minutes or so about through-channel marketing automation. You'll be successful if you are able to understand your channel partner. We call them archetypes, you know, the Luddites, power marketer right through to corporate marketer. Be able to understand that, because that really does inform the way that you do your TCMA projects. And of course that will change over time, so it's not something you do one-off and then forget about it. It's something you need to monitor and record and research maybe on an annual basis. So there's one success KPI. Another one is really setting yourself realistic objectives and metrics when you plan your project, setting expectations, of course, to your own management. You know, if you know what you're going to be measuring, and ideally, the key to success in any project, when you decide to measure success on a certain KPIs, you need to know what the original value would be for those KPIs. And so you need to take also an assessment of your measurement metrics before you do the project, not just when you finish the project, to show improvement, to be able to identify that improvement. And then last but not least, we think it's also important for you to consider all the different players that you're working with. A TCMA project actually involves so many different players. It's not just a marketing-led project. You need to think about the effect on your sales force. You need to think about the involvement of the channel managers, the channel field that you have in your own company, as well as, of course, the channel itself who are going to be involved with you. And always use them as your test case, involve them in your design plan and in your roadmap, and always maintain consistent communication across the channel ecosystem. Some companies that are even more complex need to, of course, maybe even affect their product planning and their product management colleagues in these plans, because it may change how products are presented and how products are brought to market. So I talked about cacophony right at the start of this presentation. A cacophony is a whole range of different sounds from different instruments and different sources that are not in tune with each other. And I think with a TCMA system, if you put that together as a manufacturer, as an enterprise marketer, and put it together, the services, the needs, and matches the attributes of the channel partners that you have in your ecosystem, you are going to end up with an orchestrated sound, an orchestrated process, and automation process that can be clearly measured and clearly has value both for yourselves, your customers, and your channel partners. And with that, I'd like to thank you very much for your interest. And let's have a look. There's one more slide I notice now, which is a quote from a client of ours at a company called Gainsight. Companies expect success. If you aren't providing that, you'll struggle to retain customers. Companies aren't scaled for that. They need the partner channel to help their customers succeed. Basically a statement around the importance of the partner channel. And the last slide that I have before handing back to Jeff is that slide with my email address. Remember, if you appreciated this presentation and are interested in more information from Forrester, drop me a note to this email address and I'll send you that report that I've mentioned and used also during this presentation. Thanks a lot for your time, and handing back to Jeff.
Great. Thank you, Peter. Thank you very much. I'd like to remind anybody that we are monitoring questions, so if you do want to post a question, you can put it on the GoToMeeting question panel on the right-hand side of your screen. Peter, there are a couple questions here that were asked from the group. The first being, how many of your clients, Forrester clients, have incorporated a TCMA strategy? Do you have any numbers around that?
I don't have numbers, and the number would not actually say anything because it has no relationship to how many companies should be doing it. We see it as an emerging technology. I would say of all the companies that do have rich ecosystems of partners, maybe we're at about 15% now of those that have now implemented TCMA. So it's a new market. A lot of them are trying to get by with the more standard marketing automation systems, or they have their own special project that they program themselves internally to sort of cover the gaps. What we will definitely see over the next few years is an emerging interest in buying TCMA packaged software, because these solutions now are quite mature. They're usually offered as a service, as you described, Jeff, right at the start of this webinar. And so we anticipate a fast growth. And we have something called a tech radar, which is an analysis across all the different technology categories in marketing. If I remember rightly, in B2B, we have 19 different categories. And we did flag in the tech radar TCMA as one of the hot technologies.
And it's a new market. You mentioned that there is another question here around ROI. Do you have any calculation on ROI or anything that should be expected as far as ROI when incorporating this strategy?
Well, the metrics to work that out were described on one of those slides right at the end. I mean, those are the different metrics you might want to pick to work out your return on investment. We do have a model at Forrester called total economic impact. And we have done a couple of projects for clients to calculate the total economic impact of implementing a TCMA system, and it's always been very positive. And so usually the payback, it does take, because of the complexity of the ecosystem that you're dealing with, it's third party, so it's not just everything within one company. The payback is usually over a year, so into the second year. But then it is very positive, and the economic impact is very strong.
Right. And then another question from the group here: do any of your clients use HubSpot as a TCMA solution? If yes, how effective?
I'd rather not comment on individual vendors. Who knows who posed that question? HubSpot is very much a mid-market marketing automation system. They even have a CRM platform these days, which they give away for free. It's probably the case that some companies are using HubSpot even with a system of channel partners. They probably don't call it TCMA then, but they're using it in that manner. It has the flexibility, but no, I wouldn't like to name any.
Okay. There's another question here, and this is around technology again, primary differences between Marketo and MarcomCentral, and I can answer that for the crowd. And again, we'll answer these questions if we didn't get to your question offline as well. But Marketo is a marketing and automation tool used by companies to automate email marketing, and it's run by marketing departments on behalf of sales. So it's content that marketing's created. They're sending campaigns to trigger leads and then send them to sales. MarcomCentral is a marketing asset management platform. So it's a library of content that can be accessed by sales channels of all different types, direct sales, as Peter talked about today, channel partners, and it's approved content that they can use. So MarcomCentral actually integrates with Marketo, so Marketo email templates can be accessed by sales and triggered from MarcomCentral, so there's an integration of those two products. So if you have any further questions on that, feel free to ask. There's a couple questions on a copy of this presentation. It has been recorded, so that a copy of that will be made available to anybody who registered. So I did want to let everybody know there. And then there's another question here, Peter, and it's about your report, and it's a question: is it possible to share one benefit that was listed in your report?
Ooh, straight off the top of my head, let's have a look.
One best practice of the TCMA report.
Well, one best practice I named already during the presentation was providing agency support when you roll out the project to your channel partners. Another one is that we found that companies were more successful when they started at the digital asset level, or when they started actually integrating to the digital asset management system in their company. There was a tendency in other companies to think about the lead management process or campaign process, and that is a little bit a looser process, but when they actually started, let's say at the bottom of the TCMA pyramid, as it were, around digital asset management, they were more successful because they were able to show early success, they were able to show sharing of content. So the type of solution that MarcomCentral is probably the best way to go when you're really starting a project.
Great. Yeah, that actually ties into another question here, which was, is there a platform that you recommend first, or that they should consider first? So that kind of ties into that question as well.
Mm-hmm.
So with that, if there are any other questions, please post them now. Peter, I'd like to thank you very much for your time today. Excellent presentations. There were a lot of thank yous from the audience posted there. So, and again, anybody who's requesting the presentation, we will make that available to you. If there are no other questions, we will end the presentation today. I'd like to thank everybody on the line for their time. We look forward to hearing from you. If you have any additional questions, we will answer those offline. And again, Peter, thank you very much. Have a good rest of your evening.
No problem. Bye-bye, everybody, and look forward to hearing from you.